Hello there, I'm Aileen. At my sister's wedding, she handed me a worn-out dress and said, "It suits you better." I smiled, but I left. What followed wasn't just embarrassment. It was a lifetime of being quietly erased. They replaced me in the family photos, took my name off the ceremony list, gave away my role. And when I finally stood up for myself, my mother said I was never family to begin with. It wasn't just one wedding. It was every moment before and after where I was told, without words, that I didn't belong. I stepped out of the Uber, heels clicking against the sun-baked stone driveway of the Whitmore estate. The humidity hugged me tight, Charleston air thick with the perfume of roses and old money. I took in the scene, white canopies, perfectly lined champagne flutes, and the murmur of southern charm. Everyone looked like they'd been rehearsing their smiles for weeks. I was the only one dragging her own suitcase through the main entrance like a late check-in. No one turned to greet me. No one rushed over. Just a wedding planner with bleached teeth and a clipboard who glanced at me over her sunglasses and said, "Ah, Miss Aileen, right? You're in one of the garden rooms. It's, simple but cozy." Her smile was tight, practiced, like the kind you give a customer who's about to leave a bad Yelp review. I gave her a nod, walked past two groomsmen adjusting their collars in the mirror, and headed toward my assigned suite. The inside of the room was what I'd call Southern antique chic, if I were feeling generous. Cream curtains, pale blue bedding, and an overpowering lavender potpourri scent that clung to my throat. Jolene had always known how to make me feel like a tourist in my own family. I'd barely unpacked when I got the text, "Come to the Oak Room. I have something for you, Jay." That emoji alone told me this wasn't kindness. When I entered, she was already surrounded by her bridal crew, 6 women in matching silk robes, sipping mimosas and laughing like life was a rom-com, and they were the stars. She spotted me and waved like I was a distant acquaintance, not her sister. "Oh, good, you came," she said brightly. "I have something special for you." She handed me a long, narrow garment box. It looked like it had been stored under someone's bed for years. I opened it. Satin, pale gold, with visible creases and faint discoloration around the underarms. The kind of thing you'd find on a discount rack at a thrift store, and wonder who died in it. "It suits you better," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Her tone was syrupy, but her eyes were knives. One of the bridesmaids snorted behind her mimosa. "It's got that vintage vibe," she whispered, not bothering to lower her voice. "Very nostalgic." Another chimed in, "Honestly, it's got character, just like Aileen, timeless." And then came the laughter, sharp, rehearsed, layered with sugar and venom. I smiled politely, because I'd been taught not to cause a scene, because if I said what I really wanted to say, it would have ruined the mood. And ruining Jolene's mood was a cardinal sin in this family. I ran my hand over the fabric. It had been altered. Poorly. The seams puckered at the waist, the hem uneven. Not only was it second-hand, it had been tampered with. My size wasn't even that different from Jolene's, but this thing had clearly been cinched and stitched to fit someone else's idea of what I should look like. "You know," Jolene said, turning to the group like she was hosting a talk show, "this used to be one of my favorites back when I was, 20? It's got history." Then, turning back to me, "I knew you'd appreciate that." She didn't mean the dress, she meant the humiliation. I held it up to the light, inspecting it like a museum piece. "Thank you," I said. "It's definitely memorable." They laughed again. I didn't. I excused myself before I could say something sharp enough to slit open the mood. Back in my room, I hung the dress on the closet door. It looked even worse in direct light, like someone had tried to scrub out stains that wouldn't lift. A metaphor, maybe. This wasn't the first time Jolene had pulled something like this. It was just the first time she'd done it so publicly. Birthdays that passed with nothing more than a text, promotions she never mentioned. Even at Dad's funeral, she'd acted like I was just the person who arranged the chairs. They called me strong, independent, the one who didn't need anything. But really, I was just the one who stopped asking. I stood in front of the mirror and held the dress up to my body. The reflection didn't lie. It didn't fit. It never did. I knew what this was. A warning dressed as a gift. It said, Stay in your place. Don't try to shine. And if you show up anyway, wear something that proves you don't belong. But here's the thing about growing up invisible. Eventually, you learn how to watch. You learn how to listen for what isn't being said. And right now, what wasn't being said was the truth. That truth? I was done playing along. I smoothed the dress down and smiled. A real smile this time, because they had just handed me a reason to stop pretending. And I'd never been one to waste an opportunity, because I was done pretending. But they were far from done pushing me. By the time the sun dipped behind the oaks and the twinkle lights lit up the outdoor patio, I had ironed the dress, pulled my hair into something passable, and touched up my lip gloss like I belonged. That was my mistake, thinking I still had a role to play in a show I wasn't even cast in. The rehearsal dinner buzzed with energy, plates clinking, champagne flutes rising in toasts that didn't include my name. I waited, expecting someone to tell me where to stand, what to do, as maid of honor. After all, Jolene had named me that 6 months ago in a text full of hearts and fake sentiment. Instead, during the first toast, Jolene wrapped an arm around Holly, her sorority sister with platinum curls and Botox at 30, and said, "This beautiful woman right here is my rock, my soul sister, and my maid of honor." She raised her glass. Everyone followed. My fingers gripped the edge of my wine glass so tight I thought it might crack. She didn't even look at me, didn't offer an explanation, not even a sideways glance. When I finally found a quiet moment with her by the oyster bar, I asked, "When did Holly become your maid of honor?" Jolene popped a shrimp cocktail in her mouth, wiped her fingers daintily, and said, "Oh, last month? Honestly, you've been so busy with your career stuff. I didn't want to stress you out. Holly's here more. She just fits the aesthetic better, you know?" I stared at her. "Fits the aesthetic?" She shrugged. "It's coastal garden glam, Aileen. You're more structured." I laughed. One dry, humorless exhale. Right, because nothing says glam like betrayal served on a silver platter. Jolene leaned in, eyes sharp. "Don't make this about you." I didn't reply, because I knew if I said one more word, I'd explode. And if there's one thing my mother warned me about, it was making scenes. Speak of the devil. Not 2 minutes after that exchange, Dolores found me standing alone near the terrace. She looked impeccable, of course. Pearl earrings, that wine-colored wrap dress she only wore to impressive events. She touched my elbow like she always did when she was about to say something manipulative wrapped in concern. "Sweetheart, can I offer a little advice?" she said, already talking before I could answer. "Let this be Jolene's moment. Please, don't make it complicated." I raised an eyebrow. Complicated? She's under a lot of pressure. You know how emotional she gets. And people are watching. This family, we've always held ourselves with grace. I tilted my head. Meaning what exactly? She smiled, tight, polished, and empty. Meaning smile even when it hurts. That's what women like us do. I almost choked on the hypocrisy. She hadn't smiled at me since 2009. "And you," she added, "you've always been the calm one, the mature one. That's why I never had to worry about you, unlike Jolene." Right. Because being the forgotten child meant I was the convenient one, the quiet placeholder, the safety net. Dolores looked at my dress. "That's the gown she gave you, huh? It's different." "Yeah," I said. "It screams forgotten attic box." She gave a chuckle that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, you know your sister. Always sentimental. If sentimentality meant cutting someone out and laughing about it behind their back, then sure." I walked away before she could say more. Found a seat at the far edge of the lawn, near the fountain, where the string quartet's music was a murmur and not a migraine. And then came the photos. "Family shots!" the photographer called. "Bride side, let's get everyone in!" People started lining up. I stood ready to join when a woman with a camera and headset stopped me. "Oh, sorry, bride side only for this set." I blinked. "I'm her sister." The woman flushed. I was told this was for parents and the bridal party?" Of course she was. I didn't argue. I just turned and walked back to my seat. It wasn't worth it. Not the pictures, not the smile I would have had to fake. Later that night, I scrolled through Jolene's Instagram. Photos from every angle, laughing, sipping champagne, hugging Holly, posing with Dolores and our dad like a perfect portrait family. I wasn't in a single frame, not even the background. That was the point. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not out of shock, just confirmation. They weren't just ignoring me anymore. They were writing me out in real time. Eventually, one of the caterers passed by and paused. "You okay, ma'am? Would you like another glass of wine?" I looked up. The garden lights danced in his glasses. "Are you family or guest?" he added, trying to clarify. I smiled. "That depends who you ask." So I stopped looking for my name. I knew it wouldn't be there. Saturday morning brought the rehearsal brunch. I arrived a little early. Habit, I guess. Even when they make you feel like a shadow, you show up on time. The ballroom was already buzzing, music humming low, plates being set with silver trim and calligraphed place cards. Everything screamed perfection, right down to the custom napkins embossed with Jolene and Reuben. I made my way toward the seating chart pinned to a massive gold frame near the entrance. Guests crowded around it, laughing, pointing at their names. I stood there longer than I should have, scanning every row. Tables 1 through 13, names printed neatly in navy ink, all visible, all accounted for. Mine wasn't there. I squinted, checked again. My last name, my first. Any variation, nothing. A woman with a headset approached, holding a clipboard. "Miss Aileen? I believe you're at table 14. It's just over by the side exit, past the buffet station." I followed her finger. I hadn't missed it. Table 14 wasn't even listed. She added with a half-hearted smile, "It's more private, intimate. Better for catching your breath, you know?" "Sure. Or for being out of sight." I didn't respond. I walked slowly, passing through clusters of people greeting each other like long-lost friends. I made my way past the wine cart, the dessert display, and finally found it. Table 14. A two-top, jammed near the fire exit, directly beside a stack of folded chairs, and a door propped open with a sandbag. The place card read Aileen in hurried ink. No floral print, no gold foil. Just a name scribbled as an afterthought. I stared at it for a long time. The laughter from the main tables echoed like a taunt. I could see Jolene at the center, gesturing wildly as she told some dramatic story, no doubt about how she once saved a bird or broke a heel. The crowd leaned in, captivated. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was resigned. As I turned to leave the table, I passed a display of framed photos set on easels. Wedding photos of our parents, a baby photo of Jolene, a graduation shot, her in white cap and gown, Dolores clutching her like she'd birthed royalty. But there was no photo of me. Not from high school, not college, not Christmases, not a single one. They didn't just forget. I'd been edited out. A large canvas print hung near the dance floor, Jolene and Dolores at Jolene's high school graduation. I remember being there. I took the damn picture. No sign of me in it. I wandered into the restroom, needing space more than anything. Inside, soft music played overhead, lavender soap foamed at the sink, and the air smelled like fake citrus and judgment. 2 bridesmaids entered, talking loud enough to be heard in another state. I swear, did you see the look on her face when she realized she was at the table for leftovers? "Right?" the other laughed. "That dress, though, like something you'd find at a thrift store's clearance bin." I froze in the stall. The first one lowered her voice, but not enough. "I mean, she's Jolene's sister, but she gives guest energy, you know?" "I give her credit, though," the second replied. "She's mastered the art of being invisible." They laughed. Water ran. One of them reapplied lip gloss. "She should have just RSVP'd no and saved everyone the tension." Or worn something less sad. They left. I stayed. 5 more minutes, maybe 10. Then I flushed the toilet, stepped out, looked at myself in the mirror. And for once, I didn't adjust my hair. Didn't check my lipstick. I just looked. At myself. At the woman they couldn't bother to include, but somehow still feared enough to mock. I walked out of that restroom and back into the reception with no expression. No storming off, no words. I passed my table, looked at the place card again, then picked it up and dropped it in the trash bin beside the catering door. I wasn't going to raise my voice. Not yet. But this? This was the last time they shrank me and expected me to stay small. You don't get to erase me and expect me to stay silent. And it turned out, I wasn't the only one noticing the cracks. Saturday evening, the light had turned honey gold through the ballroom windows, and people moved like clockwork between the lounge, the reception hall, and the outdoor courtyard where the cocktail hour buzzed with energy. I'd stepped away, just for a breather. No real destination, just space. That's when I saw Reuben. He stood alone by the bar, nursing what looked like the same glass of whiskey from earlier. One hand in his pocket, the other tapping the rim of the glass rhythmically, like he was keeping time with a silent thought. He saw me before I could look away. "Aileen," he said, with a nod that wasn't quite casual, but not stiff either. I walked over. I didn't plan to. My legs just moved, maybe because he was the only person in this circus who hadn't looked at me like I was a prop that didn't match the set. "Did Jolene always talk to you that way?" he asked before I could say anything. I blinked. "Excuse me?" He looked down at his drink. The tone, the little digs. I don't know. I used to think it was sibling banter, but lately it feels like something else. There was no accusation in his voice, just confusion, like someone realizing the map they'd been following was wrong all along. "She's always known how to fill a room," I said, careful. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, but now I'm wondering who she has to push out of the frame to do it." That line sat between us for a second too long. He didn't wait for an answer, just nodded again and turned back toward the main room. Later, during the walkthrough of the ceremony flow, I noticed it. Reuben wasn't holding her hand when the coordinator walked them through the aisle steps. He stood just behind her, nodding, but distant. When she laughed too loud, he didn't join in. When she tried to pull him into a joke with the groomsmen, he offered a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Dolores noticed. She glanced at them more than once, lips pressed tight. But Inez, his mother, watched everything with the calm calculation of a woman who's lived through worse and always landed on her feet. She wasn't subtle, but she didn't need to be. Her son was slipping away from the grip of this illusion, and she wasn't going to stop it. Jolene didn't seem to notice. She was too busy orchestrating moments for the photographer, adjusting her bouquet angle, practicing her tilt, making sure every strand of hair knew its place. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so pathetic. I stepped outside for air. That's when I met her, a woman in her mid-30s, sipping a glass of white wine with the kind of relaxed posture that said she wasn't part of this show, just attending it. She offered a kind smile. "You're Jolene's sister, right?" she asked. I nodded, waiting for the punchline. "I thought so. It's strange, though. I've been looking through all the photos and slideshows they've been showing inside. I didn't see you in any of them." Her voice wasn't cruel. It wasn't even suspicious. Just casually confused, the way someone points out that a chair is missing from the table. I offered a tight smile. "Guess I'm just not very photogenic." She tilted her head. "That can't be it." She was gone before I could explain away the discomfort. I leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the field lights flickering on in the distance. There were dozens of people here. Dozens of ways Jolene had crafted this image of herself. And yet, even strangers were starting to see through it. That did something to me. It wasn't revenge that crossed my mind. It was clarity. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to shove my way into the spotlight. What I needed was to stop stepping aside. If even Reuben, Mr. "We're just excited to build a future together," was seeing the cracks, maybe this wasn't just in my head. Maybe it never was. And maybe Jolene's version of reality wasn't as airtight as she thought. The best part about the truth? It doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs someone to stop dimming it. And I wasn't going to dim it anymore. I was done being polite. The bridal suite waiting area smelled like hairspray, cheap champagne, and manufactured serenity. The kind of place where fake tears dried quicker than real ones. The wedding was just hours away. Jolene was somewhere down the hall making last-minute demands about floral placement or lighting. I sat in the corner, pretending to scroll through my phone while trying not to exist too loudly. That's when Ellie, Jolene's 10-year-old daughter, ran in, breathless and giggling, her tablet in one hand and Jolene's phone in the other. "Oops! Mommy forgot this," she chirped, dropping the phone on the couch next to me before skipping off. I didn't plan to touch it, but the screen lit up. A new text thread flashed open. One Ellie had clearly been playing around in before the phone locked. The message at the top read, "Gave her the old dress. LOL. Looked pathetic. She still wore it." Underneath it, another one from Jolene herself. "She's so desperate to be included. It's almost sad." My stomach clenched, but my hands stayed steady. I pressed the side button and took a screenshot. Then another. And another. She hadn't just humiliated me. She bragged about it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a campaign. Finally, I had something more than bruised feelings. I had evidence. Before I could process what to do next, Ellie came bounding back into the room. "Aunt Aileen, do you really not have a family?" I turned slowly. "What?" She looked up at me, blinking innocently. "Mom says you're jealous because you don't have a husband or kids or a house. That you're just mad because no one picked you." The words hit harder than they should have, coming from a child. But children don't lie. They repeat. I forced a smile. "That's not something you should worry about, sweetheart." She nodded, not really understanding, and ran off again. I sat there a moment longer, the phone burning in my pocket now. My breath felt shallow, not because of the insult, but because of the clarity. I stood and walked with purpose. Dolores was in the lounge, sipping her lukewarm tea and pretending she didn't see me approach. She looked up, surprised by my expression. "We need to talk," I said. She sighed. "Aileen, not now. This isn't—" I cut her off. "I saw Jolene's texts." That got her attention. Her jaw clenched slightly, but her eyes didn't widen. No guilt, no panic, just calculation. She laughed about that dress, said I looked pathetic, that she gave it to me to embarrass me. Dolores didn't even blink. "You should be grateful she even let you attend." "Let me attend?" I stared at her, stunned. "You've never really been part of this family," she added, voice flat. "Jolene's always been special. You've always been fine. There's a difference." That sentence, so casual, so sharp, sliced right through the years of fake smiles and thankless effort. Never been part of this family. I took a deep breath, then looked her straight in the eye. "You've made your choice. I'm making mine." She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't let her. "If Jolene pushes again, she won't get silence in return. This was your last warning." And I meant it. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't begging, I was done with both. Dolores didn't stop me as I walked out. She didn't call after me, because somewhere deep down she knew the dam had cracked. The daughter she could overlook had found something louder than approval. Conviction. They thought silence was weakness. I was about to teach them it was strategy. And I wasn't wearing gloves anymore. The hallway outside the bridal dressing room had a chill to it. Not from the temperature, Charleston was humid even in spring, but from the mood. You could feel the tension crawling along the walls like static, too thick to ignore. The ceremony was 2 hours away, and everyone moved like glass, fragile, shiny, about to shatter. I was leaning against a narrow window ledge, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, when Inez approached. She didn't smile, just nodded for me to follow her into a quieter alcove. "I've been watching," she began softly. "Longer than you think." I didn't say a word, just tilted my head slightly. I'd learned silence often speaks louder than questions. Inez pulled a thin folder from her purse, the kind that makes a satisfying snap when you open it flat. Inside were printed emails, clearly dated and highlighted, legal correspondence, one from Ruben's attorney, another from Jolene's email. "She was supposed to sign a prenup," Inez said. "It's standard in our family, but she dodged it. Lied, cried, stalled." She pointed to a message time-stamped 3 weeks ago. "I don't think he'll push it. He's too in love. I can distract him if needed." That line punched me harder than I expected. "She never planned to protect him," Inez added. "She planned to use him." I looked up at her. "Why are you telling me this?" She took a deep breath. "Because he won't believe it coming from me, but he might hear it if it comes from you." "And you want me to tell him?" "No," she said. "Not unless it falls apart. But if it does, I want you ready." I closed the folder, handed it back. "I'm not here to protect anyone anymore. I'm here to stop pretending." Her eyes didn't soften, but they warmed, just slightly. As I turned to walk away, she asked one last thing. "If today goes bad, will you speak up?" I paused, then nodded. "Loud enough for everyone." Back in the hallway, I barely made it 10 steps before Jolene cornered me. heels clicking like accusations on the marble floor. "Oh, look, the martyr returns," she sneered. "Should I cue the sad violin?" I faced her fully, calm, collected. "No music needed," I replied. "But maybe a mirror." She blinked, caught off guard by my tone. "Still playing perfect?" I asked. "You might want to rehearse what honesty feels like. It's coming for you." She smirked, trying to gather control. "This is why no one ever takes you seriously, Aileen. And yet here you are, cornering me in a hallway, hoping I'll stay quiet." She flinched. "Don't worry," I added. "I won't ruin your big day. The truth will handle that for me." And I walked away. Out in the corridor, a group of bridesmaids were fussing over a torn hem, nervous giggles floating around. I stopped just long enough to be heard. "You might want to check with Ruben," I said loud enough for the entire room. "There's a few surprises coming. This show's almost over." Gasps. One of them dropped her mimosa glass. Another muttered, "What the hell is she talking about?" Jolene's pale face peeked around the corner. She looked like she'd seen a ghost, and that ghost was her own reflection. I didn't need to ruin the wedding. I just had to tell the truth, and let it do the rest. By the time the sun dipped low and turned the sky a rich, theatrical gold, we were already gathering. The open-air venue was every inch the overproduced dream Jolene had promised. Rows of crisp white chairs arranged with military precision along a winding cobblestone path, petals scattered like confetti, a massive floral arch that looked more like a set piece from a period drama than something meant for real people. Everything about the setup screamed curated perfection, the kind of beauty that only exists to be posted, shared, and envied. Just like everything Jolene touched. Guests murmured politely, fanning themselves with the custom-printed programs that doubled as vanity pieces. Most didn't know each other, invited for show, not sentiment. Everyone looked just hot enough to be irritable, just invested enough to pretend. I stood off to the side, deliberately out of frame. Not hidden, just apart. Watching. Watching Jolene in her lace and glitter. Watching Ruben in his tailored navy suit, standing beneath that ridiculous arch like two porcelain figures at the top of a cake. She held his hand like it was part of her costume, another accessory to match the peonies, the pearls, the pre-approved playlist. When the music began, she gave his fingers a little squeeze, rehearsed and purposeful, like she could choreograph his pulse. A woman conducting a man. But it wasn't her that caught my attention. It was Ruben. That half smile on his face, the way his eyes didn't match it. They weren't dead, just somewhere else. Like he was watching himself from a distance, unsure of how he got here. The officiant cleared his throat and began, his voice smooth and neutral, as if he hadn't officiated 6 other weddings that month. Jolene adjusted her veil slowly, deliberately, like she was waiting for the spotlight to swing her way. And then, just when the fantasy reached its highest, most fragile note, Inez stepped out from the front row. It was quiet at first, a whisper of movement. Some people didn't even notice until they saw the phone in her hand. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice didn't tremble. "But this needs to be heard before anyone says I do." The crowd shifted, the music hiccuped, a collective intake of breath, like the moment before lightning strikes. She tapped the screen. Jolene's voice, unmistakable, rang out from the small speaker. Not a whisper, not a joke. Clear, confident, recorded in full belief she was untouchable. "Ruben's sweet, but he's not exactly hard to manage. Honestly, he's trainable. Like a golden retriever in a tux." Gasps. Not movie gasps, not dramatic ones. Real, uncomfortable sounds of shock. A champagne flute slipped from someone's fingers and shattered against stone. The officiant stopped mid-sentence, blinking. The spell broke. Jolene froze for half a second, then snapped into action. Her mask slipped but didn't shatter. She went for the phone, fast, eyes blazing. "You bitter old witch, you set this up!" But Inez didn't flinch. She just stepped back, serene. "I'm protecting my son. You already set this up. You just forgot who was watching." Ruben stood perfectly still, no emotion on his face at first, just stillness. He looked at Jolene like a man finally seeing the bottom of a well he'd fallen into. Then he spoke, into the mic clipped to his lapel. Quiet, honest. "I'd rather call off a wedding than walk into a lie." The words echoed. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Jolene let out a disbelieving laugh, trying to pull the narrative back. Seriously? You're believing them over me? They've been against me since day one. This is jealousy. It's sabotage. I stepped forward, not to gloat, just to finish what she started. No one plotted anything, Jolene. You just couldn't keep the mask on long enough. This isn't sabotage. This is truth, finally breathing. She turned to me, eyes sharp, voice venomous. You've always hated me. I met her gaze, steady. No, I stopped letting you write my story. And then Reuben turned, really turned, saw me, not as a pawn or a warning or a half-remembered regret, but as someone real. He stepped back from Jolene. She spun to the crowd, her voice shrill now. You all know me. You know this isn't who I am. Someone say something. But the silence was louder than anything she could say. Then Inez moved again, quiet but firm, standing beside her son like a shield made of truth. I know who my son is, and I know what he deserves. That was the crack. The air seemed to shift. Something invisible but essential snapped. Reuben looked at the officiant. We're done here. And that was it. He stepped down. Jolene didn't follow. Couldn't. She stood trembling, bouquet limp in her hand, caught between fury and disbelief, between wanting to scream and realizing it was too late. She turned and fled, because that's what it was, not walking out, not reclaiming dignity. It was running. Her heels clipped awkwardly on the stones, makeup streaking, her dream unraveling thread by thread in front of everyone she'd handpicked to witness her triumph. Dolores followed at a distance. No words, just that same cool elegance she'd perfected for decades. But just before disappearing behind the curtained entrance, she looked back at me. No fury, no contempt, just grief, just loss. The kind of heartbreak that happens when you realize too late you bet on the wrong daughter. I didn't move, didn't chase, didn't collapse. I just stood there, breathing. That wasn't vengeance, I thought. That was clarity. The chairs stayed full for a moment longer, people unsure of protocol, unsure if applause or condolences were appropriate. But none of it mattered. The wedding was over. And somewhere deep beneath the ruins of it all, something truer had finally begun. Twilight had crept over Charleston, like a secret being kept too long, cloaking the skyline in bruised purples and soft grays. From the window of the private lounge tucked behind the reception hall, I could see the last of the sunlight bleeding behind the low country rooftops. The sheer curtains stirred slightly in the breeze, but nothing else moved. Inside, the air was thick, soaked in everything unsaid, everything undone. It no longer smelled like celebration. It smelled like the aftermath. Grief has a weight to it, and tonight, it had settled over the room, pushing down on everything that had once been upright. I sat on a velvet settee near the tall window, alone, my fingertips slowly circling the rim of a melted candle stuck inside a cut glass holder. Its flame had long since gone out, leaving behind a pool of wax and smoke. Outside, catering staff moved in tired patterns, clearing smeared plates and half-eaten slices of fondant-covered cake from abandoned tables. Somewhere, a champagne flute toppled, landed on its side, and rolled gently to a stop. No one picked it up. An hour ago, this had been a wedding. Now it was a ghost town with fairy lights. There had been no first dance, no bouquet toss, no toasts full of inside jokes and polite laughter, just gasps, phone recordings, accusations, and the sound of 100 whispered exits. One by one, guests had slipped out, eyes wide, mouths tight. The show was over, and no one wanted to be caught in the credits. I hadn't seen Jolene since she'd bolted down the aisle like a cornered animal. I didn't expect to. I figured she was licking her wounds somewhere, rewriting the story in her head already, trying to cast herself as the wronged heroine. Let her. What I didn't expect was Dolores. The door didn't open, it slammed, and then she appeared. My mother. Elegant, imposing, angry in that specific way only she knew how to be. Cold, calculated, and absolutely sure she was in the right. Her heels clicked sharply against the wood floor as she approached, like punctuation marks to a sentence she'd been practicing all night. You couldn't just sit back, could you? Her voice cut through the stillness like a whip. You had to humiliate her in front of everyone. I turned my head slowly, deliberately. met her eyes without flinching. No one made Jolene say those things, Mom. She recorded herself. Dolores's lips thinned. You've always been jealous. That word, jealous, drifted into the room like smoke from a fire I didn't start. I didn't react. Not anymore. She was finally having her moment, she hissed, and you couldn't stand it. I tilted my head, studied her. Not the way a daughter studies a mother, but the way you look at a stranger you once trusted with your secrets. This is who you defend? I asked quietly. After everything? Dolores's jaw tensed. She's your sister. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. No, she's your favorite project. Your second chance, not mine. Her arms folded across her chest, the defensive posture of someone used to control. You've always thought you were better than us. Just because you left, got your little job, my little job paid for your medical bills last year, I said, my voice flat. Silence, the kind that isn't empty but full, of shame, of unacknowledged truth. She blinked, once, then again, harder, like she could reset the moment. You're not part of this family anymore. Those words weren't new. I'd heard them before, wrapped in passive aggression and holiday arguments, but this time, they didn't land. They didn't stick. I'd finally developed armor. I stood slowly, smoothed the creases of my dress, not because I needed to, but because I could. I took a breath, long and deep, and let it fill the space she'd tried to shrink me into for most of my life. Then stop expecting me to act like I am. Her face shifted, just for a second, a twitch near her eyes, a flicker of something behind the anger, regret maybe, or recognition. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't waiting for her to catch up. I stepped past her, paused at her shoulder, close enough for her to feel the distance between us. You chose your silence, I said. I chose the truth. That's the difference. And then I walked out. Into the courtyard, into air that didn't press down. The garden was quiet now, stripped of guests, but the scent of the hundreds of cut roses Jolene had insisted on still lingered. I passed the fountain she'd demanded be installed for the aesthetic. The water still flowed, steady, oblivious. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Every step I took didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. It felt like I was stepping into myself, unburdened, unmuted, real, like peeling off a skin someone else had sewn around me. This wasn't exile. This wasn't betrayal. This was liberation. This was the beginning of something truer than any bloodline or last name. Because here's the truth. You can only be erased if you keep showing up to be written out. And I was done offering up blank pages. So I stopped asking to be let in and started living like I was already free. It had been exactly 1 week since the wedding that never happened. The Denver skyline welcomed me back like an old friend, quiet, steady, never demanding I perform. I stepped into my apartment, dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, and didn't cry. Not because I wasn't sad, but because sadness no longer controlled the narrative. It was simply part of it. There were no texts from Jolene, no apology, no explanation. Not even a passive-aggressive quote shared to social media like she used to post when she wanted me to feel guilty but couldn't bring herself to speak. Dolores left a voicemail, short, tense. You went too far, but I guess we all did. I didn't call her back. I didn't need to. That message wasn't for me. It was for herself. A cracked admission she wasn't ready to make fully, and I wasn't about to beg for it. I spent that Monday cleaning. There was a particular kind of therapy in scrubbing out someone else's residue from your space. The worn dress, still wrinkled, still a joke, was folded into a donation bag. I didn't burn it. I didn't even rip it. That would mean it had power. Instead, I let it go like the clutter it was. The wedding fallout had gone quietly viral, not in a scandalous tabloid kind of way, but in wedding forums, planning groups, a few TikToks that blurred faces but didn't spare tone. One video of the moment Ruben called things off was titled, "When the Groom Finally Sees the Truth." The comments were ruthless. She called him trainable? Yikes. Imagine dodging that bullet in a tux. I didn't engage, but I saw. By Wednesday, Jolene had deleted all her wedding posts. Her sponsorship links were broken. A friend of mine who worked for a regional planner sent a quick text. She's not getting booked again anytime soon. Vendors talk. I typed thanks, but never hit send. It didn't matter. Vindication wasn't a dish to serve warm or cold. It just sat there. Quiet. Factual. That same evening, I sat down with a blank page and wrote a letter I never intended to send. It began, "Mom, I didn't need you to choose me. I just needed you to see me." It ended, "You never did." Then I hit delete. Closure isn't always something you hand to someone else. Sometimes it's a weight you put down silently and leave behind on the sidewalk. That Saturday, I met Vanessa, my old roommate, for brunch. She didn't ask what happened. She just slid me a mimosa and said, "You look like you slept for the first time in months." We laughed, really laughed. When the waiter came over and asked, "Table for one?" I answered without hesitation, "Not anymore." We shared a plate of lemon ricotta pancakes and traded bad date stories like high schoolers. There was no mention of dresses or altars or who said what behind whose back, just now and next. On the walk home, I didn't check my phone for missed calls. I didn't need to. I wasn't waiting for a reunion. I wasn't writing an ending that included them. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about space, about becoming something whole outside the outline someone else drew for me. Because here's the thing, you don't always get the family you want, but you always have the power to become the person they can't define. They say family is where you're supposed to feel most seen, but what happens when the people who raised you never really looked at you at all? If you've ever been the easy one, the quiet one, or the one who kept swallowing pain just to keep peace, let me tell you something I wish someone told me sooner. Silence doesn't make you strong, and it doesn't make you invisible either. It just delays the moment you finally choose yourself. I didn't walk away from my family to hurt them. I walked away to heal me. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop asking to belong in places that refuse to recognize your worth. And if you're watching this, maybe you needed to hear that too. Maybe you've been written out of someone's story, but that doesn't mean you can't start writing your own. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you? Do you believe peace is worth more than approval? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story hit home for you, or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know who's listening. And if this story didn't resonate with you, tell me why. Everyone's truth deserves to be heard. If you felt this video spoke to your heart, hit that subscribe button and follow the channel, because there are more stories like this coming. Real, raw, and made for you. Until next time, Aileen.
My name is Jessica, and I married my husband, Jack, 5 months ago. We live near his family's home. Jack has a fraternal twin sister named Emma, and they are very close, so close that it sometimes surprises people around them. At our wedding, Emma cried more than I did, which caught everyone's attention. Emma is very expressive with her emotions, but in a way that's a bit different. She often says she's straightforward, but I find that people who claim to be so are usually not. Emma often makes blunt remarks, using her straightforwardness as an excuse. She tends to dominate conversations, and she's a prime example of someone who hides behind the idea of being direct. Even though we're family, Jack and I naturally resolve our disagreements, but as a wife, I sometimes feel like an outsider. Fights can lead to serious issues like divorce, so Emma often tells me, "If you ever have trouble with Jack, don't hesitate to talk to me. I'm straightforward, and as his twin sister, I know him well and can give you the best advice." She says this every time we meet. Every weekend, Emma comes over to our house and stays late into the night. Sometimes, she drinks too much and ends up spending the night. During these times, my husband apologizes, saying, "I'm sorry. My sister is still single and feels lonely because I got married first. She'll settle down when she finds someone. I'm really sorry." But despite his apologies, I can't feel his sincerity, and my irritation grows. Emma doesn't hesitate to visit. She often makes comments like, "Hey Jessica, you're really petite, aren't you? My brother and I are about the same height. Every time I see you, I think about how small you are. Petite women are attractive, aren't they? I was even scouted to be a model once. I really admire small women. And people say twins have a telepathic connection, right? It's true, I always know what my brother is thinking, and I know his type of girl. So, I was surprised when I heard he chose you. Emma likes to make herself seem superior with these remarks, but I know why she visits so often. A mutual friend told me some things about her, and I feel a bit sorry for her. So, no matter how harsh Emma's comments are, I try not to bring it up. However, she once said, "Hey Jessica, you used to live in an old wooden apartment, right? That must have been tough. Are you small because of malnutrition? My brother and I grew up well because our family was financially comfortable. Did you marry my brother because of our family's money? I really feel sorry for you. After all, you and my brother aren't a good match, but it's not your fault. Growing up poor is tough, and it shows in you." Hearing that, I finally lost my patience. I was already tired of her repeated rude remarks, and I couldn't stand the insults to my family anymore. I can't take it anymore. How can you insult someone's family like this? Are you saying I'm small because I'm poor and malnourished? Emma was shocked by my reaction and got angry, but I couldn't hold back anymore. Are you upset that I married your brother? If that's the case, just say it directly instead of beating around the bush. I heard your boyfriend recently broke up with you. The man you liked is getting married to someone very different from you. Are you staying away from her because you still have some self-control? I bet you don't like me because I remind you of her. What are you talking about? Emma stammered. I know everything. You compare her to me and dislike me even more. You always say you're straightforward, but you're more sneaky than anyone else. Please leave now and don't come back. Anyone who insults me and my family isn't welcome in this house. What are you saying? Why are you talking like this? I'm going to tell my brother. Please go ahead. Feel free. You're awful, the worst, Emma shouted, leaving in a fury, her face red with anger. It was just as someone had told me. Emma often says she's tough and has many male friends. She has a close male friend she goes out with for dinner, movies, or drinks. Sometimes, if she misses the last train, she stays over at his place. The nature of their relationship is unclear, but Emma often jokes at parties, "If I don't find a boyfriend, I might marry him." We sometimes talk about getting married if neither of us finds someone else. I don't see him as a romantic partner, but I think we could spend our old age together because we've known each other for so long. The true feelings of her male friend are unclear, but he just nodded when Emma said she had no romantic interest in him. However, her affection for him was obvious, especially when an attractive woman was around. Emma would try to keep him away from other women at parties, staying close to him, and never leaving his side. It was clear that Emma was actually in love with him, but it seemed he didn't feel the same way. He often dismissed her, and a mutual friend told me that's why he secretly announced his engagement and distanced himself from Emma. Maybe he never really liked her and felt relieved to put some space between them. Honestly, I have mixed feelings about Emma. Even though I don't always like her, I can't help but feel sorry for her as a woman. I've tried several times to stand up to her sarcastic remarks and quiet her down, but I always felt it was unfair to criticize her too harshly, and I didn't want to seem like I was flaunting my status as a married woman. But her thoughtless actions pushed me too far, and I ended up getting emotional. I feel like I lowered myself by reacting that way. I don't regret it, but I do feel uneasy about it. I wonder how my husband will react. He values his family, so I hope he understands how I feel. When he comes home, I plan to tell him everything. That night, my husband came home with my sister-in-law, and he was furious. What have you done? I heard you said awful things to my sister, and mocked her. Hearing his angry voice, I was more confused than surprised. It seemed my sister-in-law had twisted the story when she told him. Look, my sister's crying. It must be serious if my usually tough and bold sister is in tears. Apologize to her. Behind him, my sister-in-law was holding a handkerchief to her face. Wait a minute. Won't you listen to my side of the story? Do you know she insulted my parents? Haven't you heard about that? My sister would never do such a thing, my husband said, refusing to listen. Seeing my sister-in-law smirking behind him made my anger flare up again. I don't know exactly how your sister put it, but I've been dealing with her sarcasm for a long time. I've told you about it many times, but you never really listened. Your sister said we were poor and badly raised, and she even accused me of marrying you for money. What? Yes, my family was poor, but I never felt ashamed of it. My parents worked hard to raise me, without hardship. I'm not interested in your family's wealth, and your sister was the one who started using foul language. I could put up with her sarcasm until now, but when she insulted my parents, I couldn't forgive her. Wouldn't you get angry if someone insulted your parents? My husband went silent for a moment and looked at his sister. My sister-in-law then covered her face with a handkerchief and started crying loudly. Sister-in-law, why don't you wipe your tears and tell us the truth? You always say you're so straightforward, I suggested, and my husband's eyes suddenly widened. Don't joke. I can't believe my sister would be so nasty. Besides, it's true your family is financially struggling, isn't it? What's so bad about telling the truth? My husband shouted. At those words, I felt a wave of shock. Do you really think that? I should have listened to my sister's advice. I should have understood when she said people from poor families have bad upbringings and should be avoided. She was right. What are you trying to do? Degrade my sister. Have you thought that way all along?
Yes.
Your cooking tastes poor, and over time, I felt our standards of living are different. But your attitude now has made up my mind. I can't stay with you any longer. Ultimately, I can't get along with poor people. I'll pay the alimony, so please leave. Go back to that old house of yours, he said, with a smirk on his face that matched my sister-in-law's. I no longer had the energy to argue. Understood. I'll leave, I said, packing my things into a bag and walking to the door without making eye contact with them. As I was about to leave, my sister-in-law said, "This settles it. Like I've always said, you can make up with family no matter the fight, but it's impossible with outsiders. You really are pitiful. At least try to live happily in that old house with your family," she whispered. I glanced briefly at her and quietly left the room. My father is a skilled carpenter, but his talent didn't translate into business success. My mother worked part-time to support the family. We weren't wealthy, but we never struggled to live. I had believed that my husband had chosen me knowing all about my background. I thought that if I talked things over with my sister-in-law, she would understand. But reality was different. I was faced with a strong bond between the twins, and the most painful part was realizing that my husband actually looked down on me. He insulted the cooking my mother taught me, calling it poor, and I realized he never truly loved me. As soon as I left the house, I called my parents. The moment I heard my mom's voice, I couldn't stop crying. I tried to explain the situation to her through my sobs. She was surprised and concerned. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I couldn't stand them insulting you and Dad. You sent me off hoping for my happiness." After I told her everything, my mom sighed deeply and said, "I'm coming there now, and your father is coming with me." "I appreciate it," I replied. "We're coming by car. Your father hasn't been driving much lately, but we'll be fine. Just stay put, okay?" "Thank you," I said. My parents' house was about a 20-minute drive away. As I waited at the entrance, my sister-in-law suddenly stuck her head out of the window and said, "Are you still here? That's creepy. Maybe your house is gone. Was it demolished?" "Jack, Jessica is still here. Come take a look." My husband also appeared at the window and said, "Are you really still here? What are you trying to prove?" "It's pointless to apologize now. My decision won't change." "Oh, do you need money? That's too bad." He then threw a $15 bill at me. "Take a taxi and leave quickly. If you stay here any longer, I'll call the police, okay? If your family gets into trouble, it'll only make your situation worse," he taunted. At that moment, a black car approached, catching their attention. Wow, who could that be? A politician or something, they wondered. The car stopped right in front of me, and the door quietly opened. "Miss, your ride is here," the driver said as I handed him my luggage. The window of the back seat quietly rolled down, revealing my parents. When they saw my father, Jack and Emma looked shocked. "Jack, Emma, it's been a long time," my father said. Behind him, I could see my mother's face. "My daughter has been staying with you, and we appreciate it. Since this is a residential area, we can't park for long. We have something to discuss. So, could you please join us in the car?" "Emma, you're welcome to join us too. Your parents are welcome to join us too, my father said, as my husband and sister-in-law stood speechless. My father got out of the car and invited them again. How about joining us? Drawn by my father's commanding presence, they hesitantly got into the car. This is my first time in a luxury Rolls-Royce. It's impressive, my husband said, trying to smile despite being overwhelmed. We could have taken another car, but I haven't been driving much lately, and my wife was concerned, my father explained. I'm not sure what this is about, but where are we going? My husband asked. To our family home. I'd like to have a thorough discussion with you and your sister. Your house? I don't understand. And why this car? My husband replied, confused. You might be wondering why ordinary people like us are in such a luxurious car, my father said, his intense gaze making them uneasy. As we arrived at our destination and stepped out of the car, they were stunned by the large gate in front of us. What? Where is this? My husband stammered. This is my family home. The wedding was small and only included close family, so you haven't met my father, Jessica's grandfather. I wanted you to meet him today, but unfortunately, he's been hospitalized recently. I'm sorry I couldn't introduce him, my father explained. As the gate slowly opened and we moved forward, my husband and sister-in-law followed closely, still in shock. When we entered the house, they froze in surprise. Please have a seat, my father urged, and they sat down, looking around the house with astonished expressions. What is this? What about the car we just got out of? Is this some kind of prank? Whose house is this? Surely, we didn't enter without permission? My husband asked, still bewildered. You ask an interesting question. This is my family home, my father replied. That can't be true. When we came to visit before the wedding, it was just an old wooden house. Please stop joking, my husband insisted. At my father's signal, a maid placed business cards in front of them. A carpenter with a business card? My husband muttered in confusion, reading the card. Peterson Trading, the famous corporation? That card belongs to my grandfather. He is the chairman of that company, I explained. My mother added, my husband is also an executive at the same company. Really? My husband asked, now completely taken aback. Not only that, but our family has been landowners for generations. Many of the lands around here are owned by my grandfather, I continued. Really? Then why did he choose to be a carpenter and live in such an old apartment? My husband asked, still trying to make sense of it all. My father resisted taking over the family business and chose to be a carpenter in his youth as a form of rebellion. Since Jessica was born, he has reconciled with my grandfather and has been supporting our lifestyle, my mother explained. We enjoy family trips abroad, once a month. My mother's family owns a famous dress shop that's known internationally. In their youth, they were inspired by a song to live this kind of lifestyle. By the way, do you remember in middle school when you almost missed the school trip because you overslept? My grandfather sent me to the location by rotorcraft when I was desperate. I ended up arriving before the buses, and my classmates were really surprised. It's true I used to live in an old wooden apartment, but on weekends, I stayed at my grandfather's large house with my family. We celebrated special occasions like birthdays there, so it felt like I had two homes, which I really enjoyed. Why have you kept quiet for so long? Wait, Jessica's maiden name doesn't match her grandfather's last name, they said, accusing me of lying. All our family could do was sigh at their shouting. Just 20 minutes after being kicked out by my husband, there's no way a house and car could be prepared so quickly, they argued. No one would create such a huge lie just because they were insulted. When we first got married, my husband moved into my family home because of a conflict with his own. But my brother and his wife took over our family home, and my husband was supposed to succeed his father as chairman. As my mother explained, my husband grimaced, gripping the business card tightly. Jessica, why did you keep this a secret? If you had known, would you have treated me any better? I asked. They turned away and fell silent. If you're wondering why I kept it hidden, it's because I didn't want to make our family background public. I'm tired of people judging others by their family status, and my parents feel the same way, so I agreed with them. But I couldn't stay silent when my daughter was insulted, my father said. My father, Jessica's grandfather, loves her very much, And if he were here now, I wonder how he would have reacted. A photo of my grandfather hung behind my father, as if he were watching my husband and sister-in-law's behavior. By the way, the company your father works for is actually a subsidiary of ours. Did you know that? My father revealed. The expressions on my husband and sister-in-law's faces suddenly turned pale. I actually wanted to meet your parents today, but are they at home? Yes, they are, I believe, my husband stammered. They're on a trip right now, my sister-in-law quickly added. Their flustered behavior made it clear they were lying, but my father just laughed at the absurdity of it all. Understood, then. It can't be helped, he said with a smile. Let's have a thorough discussion about the way you treated my daughter and whether your parents share the same views, my father said. Is this really necessary? Why do you need to confirm such things? My husband asked, sounding defensive. My daughter wants to come back home. She asked us to come and get her. My father replied. Are you saying she should get divorced? Weren't you the one who suggested that? My husband asked, turning to me. I could only nod under his gaze. Wait a minute. Being called here out of the blue, finding out about your wealth, and now being pushed towards divorce, this is all too much. If we had known, this wouldn't have happened, my husband stammered. So, what are you trying to say? What would you have done if you knew about my family's background? I realized I had put up with my sister-in-law's words because I still cared for my husband. But today, seeing his true nature, that affection quickly faded. After hearing him ridicule my parents, I knew I couldn't stay with him anymore. I was disappointed that he judged people based on their family background. You and your sister said today that poor people should go back to their old homes. That's not something I can accept. Yes, I want a divorce, I said firmly. I want a divorce too, my husband responded. Wait, that was just a joke. I didn't mean it seriously, he tried to backtrack. But didn't you say yourself that you feel the difference in our living standards every day? And you called the traditional flavors poor. Even if it was a joke, I can't live with someone who makes such remarks, I replied. The divorce is mutually agreed upon. If you start fresh with someone who shares your lifestyle, everything will be resolved, right? My father added. That's so. Let's discuss this again with your parents. For now, you may leave, my father said, as the maid tried to guide my husband and sister-in-law out. But my husband refused and yelled, This is no joke. What are you saying? Weren't you the ones laughing at us behind the scenes? He was visibly angry, his face turning red. My sister-in-law chimed in. Exactly. Pretending to be a poor carpenter, but actually being wealthy? Did you call us here to trap us? What is this? A recreation of an old drama. I don't believe any of this. Is this really a real house? Or is it some kind of set? Are all these staff hired actors? She was yelling just as loudly as my husband. Calm down first, my father said, trying to soothe my husband. But as my husband jerked away, his arm accidentally knocked over a vase, sending it crashing to the floor. The sound startled everyone, and the maids quickly rushed to the broken pieces, their faces turning pale. Why are you so surprised? It's just a vase. Probably something from a dollar store, my husband said loudly, looking down at the maids as they gathered the shattered pieces. Seeing this, my father sighed and picked up a piece of the debris. You said you would pay alimony to proceed with the divorce, but can you afford the cost of this vase? He asked. My husband looked shocked. What? It's worth $150,000. My great-grandfather had it made by a famous artist. It's irreplaceable, my father explained. Then he asked again, Did you tell my daughter you would pay alimony? Under my father's sharp gaze, my husband's face went from pale to stark white. Wait, it was my brother who broke it. This has nothing to do with me. I didn't even touch the vase, my sister-in-law protested, but no one responded to her. Desperate, she clung to my arm. See, it has nothing to do with me, right? Why are you angry at me? I think I'm being misunderstood. I'm the type who says what's on my mind right away, and if that's why you're upset, I sincerely apologize. I'll change, okay? While calming her trembling arm, I looked directly into her eyes. People who claim to be straightforward don't run away or dodge issues. You can't use that as an excuse. Unfortunately, a small action has turned into a big problem, I said. My sister-in-law was left speechless, her eyes wide with shock. Can we take a moment? I can't keep up with all this. We're still a married couple, right? So let's go home and talk this over, my husband suggested, but I felt no sympathy for him. Do you remember when you broke your grandfather's valuable ashtray as a child? I asked. Yes, that ashtray was worth $100,000, and I was completely helpless when I apologized, he admitted. Yes, but grandfather forgave you right away and never asked for compensation, I reminded him. Hearing this, my husband and sister-in-law's expressions softened a bit. However, I stood in front of them and repeated the words they needed to hear. Family relationships can be mended, but once there's a breakdown between a married couple, it's hard to repair. This is something I learned from you twins. I said this, and their faces turned pale again. After that, our divorce was officially finalized. My in-laws didn't say anything during the process and stopped all support for the twins. They agreed to pay for the vase, which saved my father-in-law from losing his job and my mother-in-law from social isolation. I never knew my grandfather was so highly respected. I heard that my ex-husband and sister-in-law are secretly working night jobs to pay for the vase. The twins, who used to be very close, had a big fight over the compensation, and now they don't even speak to each other. My father continues to work hard as always, and my mother keeps supporting him. Because of this incident, I caused a lot of trouble for my parents and grandfather, so I sincerely reflect on this and plan to live more humbly from now on. My name is Marilyn, and I work as an editor at a big publishing house in the city. I'm just a regular girl who likes to keep life simple. Life's always been busy, juggling work deadlines and finding time for myself. Maybe that's why I never got into dating much. I usually preferred being on my own with a good book or taking quiet walks in the park near my apartment. But everything changed one sunny Thursday that seemed like any other. I was listening to a podcast and strolling through the park, lost in my own world. The park was lively, kids running around, people with their pets everywhere. I must have been distracted because, out of nowhere, a guy on a bike almost ran into me. "Watch it," he yelled, swerving just in time. His voice was sharp, clearly annoyed. "I'm so sorry," I quickly said, pulling out one of my earbuds. I hadn't noticed I'd wandered onto the bike path. He stopped his bike and turned to look at me. Instead of angry, he now seemed more amused. "You've got to watch where you're going. This path's like a jungle sometimes," he said. "Yeah, my bad. Totally my fault," I admitted, feeling embarrassed. I brushed a strand of hair from my face and gave him a shy smile. He laughed, and just like that, the tension was gone. "I'm Peter," he said, holding out his hand. "Marilyn," I replied, shaking it. His handshake was firm and confident. "So, Marilyn, are you always this distracted, or is it just because of my charm?" he asked with a playful grin that made me laugh. "Just a long week at work. My brain's already in weekend mode," I said with a shrug. "Fair enough. I was just about to grab a coffee at that place over there," he said, pointing to a little cafe at the edge of the park. "Want to join me? Consider it a peace offering for almost knocking you over." I thought about it for a moment. He seemed nice, and honestly, I could use a coffee. "Sure, why not? I could use a good coffee story," I said. As we walked to the cafe, Peter was easy to talk to. He told me about his job at a car sales company and how he spent his weekends biking or hanging out with friends. He wasn't originally from the city. He'd moved here because he thought it offered more opportunities. "You know, big city dreams and all that," he said with a grin. I shared a bit about myself too, how much I loved books and turned that passion into a career. "Beats being stuck in a cubicle doing something you hate," I added. When we got to the cafe, we ordered our coffees. While we waited, I realized how comfortable I felt around him. It was unusual for me since I'm usually more reserved with new people. But with Peter, the conversation just felt natural. After that, we started hanging out more. Peter was funny and easygoing. But after a while, I started noticing little things that bothered me. At first, it was small comments, nothing big, but enough to make me think. One Thursday, we went out for dinner, and the topic of careers and family came up. It was just casual talk. At least, that's what I thought. "So, How's the book world treating you? Peter asked, sipping his beer. It's busy as always. Deadlines don't stop for anyone, I said, poking at my salad. Yeah, I get that. But you wouldn't want to do that forever, right? Eventually, you'd want to settle down, maybe work less, he said, sounding casual. I paused, my fork halfway to my mouth. Not really, Peter. I love what I do. I don't see myself giving it up anytime soon, or ever, really. Peter shrugged. Sure, but what about when we have kids? Wouldn't you want to be around more? His question caught me off guard. I asked with a nervous laugh. That's jumping ahead, don't you think? He laughed too. Yeah, you're right. Just thinking out loud, I guess. I tried to brush off the awkwardness, but it stayed with me. A couple of weeks later, Peter invited me to have dinner with his parents. I thought it was a good sign, things were getting serious. I was nervous, but hopeful. When we arrived at his parents' cozy house in the suburbs, his mom, Mrs. Dillon, greeted me warmly. Marilyn, so lovely to finally meet you. Peter has told us so much about you, she said, pulling me into a hug. Thank you for having me, Mrs. Dillon. It's great to meet you too, I said, smiling back. Dinner started off nice. Everyone was polite, and the food was delicious. But then Mrs. Dillon began talking about family and marriage. You know, Peter was always the responsible one, she said while serving herself more potatoes. We've always told him how important it is to find a good girl who knows her way around the house. Peter's dad nodded. Absolutely. It's all about building a solid foundation. A man provides, and a woman takes care of the home. I glanced at Peter, hoping he'd say something, but he kept his head down, focused on his food. Mrs. Dillon went on, It's how we raised our boys. Family first, right, Peter? Right, Mom, Peter said, finally looking up. His response felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to stay calm. It's interesting because I've always been career-focused. I love my job, and I believe in sharing responsibilities equally. Mrs. Dillon gave me a sweet but dismissive smile. Of course, dear. But you'll see, priorities change when you have children. It's natural for a woman to want to stay home with her babies. The rest of the evening felt like a blur. After dinner, we left, and the car ride home was quiet and tense. Breaking the silence, I said, Your mom has some strong opinions about family roles. Do you feel the same way? Peter hesitated before saying, I think there's some truth to it. Looking back, I guess it worked for Peter's parents. Even after that awkward dinner, our relationship kept moving forward. Somehow, the good times seemed to outweigh the bad, and before I knew it, I had agreed to marry him. Love must have clouded my judgment because those warning signs were still there in the back of my mind. We started planning the wedding, and it all happened so fast. Peter and I both wanted something simple, so we decided on a small ceremony with just close family and friends. As the wedding day got closer, I started feeling more pressure. Not about the event itself, but about what our life would be like afterward. At the reception, after the ceremony, Peter's mom pulled me aside. She was smiling, but her eyes were serious. Marilyn, dear, I'm so happy for you both. Remember, a good wife supports her husband no matter what. Thank you, Mrs. Dillon. I plan to be a good partner, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. And remember, dear, she added, leaning in slightly, when the babies come, it's best if you stay home. You can't trust strangers to raise your children. Her words felt more like a command than advice, and my stomach turned. I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything else. Later, when Peter and I had a moment alone, I brought it up. Your mom talked to me about kids and how I shouldn't work. Peter just shrugged it off. Yeah, she's just thinking about the future. She means well, Marilyn. You know how moms are, he said, taking a sip of champagne. But you know I'm not planning to quit my job, right? Even when we have kids, I said, watching him carefully. Peter paused, his face turning serious. We'll see, Marilyn. Things change. We'll do what's best for our family. After the wedding, Peter suggested we move into a bigger apartment closer to his work. The place was nice, much bigger than our old one. The catch? It was right next door to his parents' house. I had a feeling I knew why Peter picked this place, but I agreed, hoping for the best. Once we settled in, the reality of our new life together started to show. Peter began talking more about his idea of a traditional family. He'd be the one earning money, and I'd handle the house and eventually the kids. One evening, we sat at the dining table with our finances spread out, a mess of bills and budgets under the dim light. I tried to show him how keeping both our jobs was better, especially with how unstable the economy was. Look at these numbers, Peter. With both incomes, we're not just scraping by, we're saving. It doesn't make sense for me to quit my job, I said, pointing at the spreadsheet. Peter shook his head and pushed the papers aside. It's not just about the money, Marilyn. It's about having a real family life like my parents had. I sighed, feeling frustrated. But it's not the past, Peter.
Things are different now.
We both need to contribute. He didn't seem convinced, and the conversation ended with an uncomfortable silence. Things got more complicated with his mom, Mrs. Dillon, living so close. She dropped by all the time, often without warning. Every visit came with a new critique of how I was managing the house. One afternoon, I was sorting through work emails when she walked in without even saying hello. She started inspecting the house, running her finger along a bookshelf to check for dust. Marilyn, you really should focus more on keeping the house clean. A dusty home isn't a healthy home, she said sharply. I clenched my teeth, trying to stay calm. I cleaned yesterday, Mrs. Dillon. And I work full-time. It's just a little dust. That's the problem, she shot back. You work too much. If you were home more, maybe things wouldn't fall behind. She then walked to the linen closet, pulled out a sheet, and inspected it like she was looking for mistakes. I followed her, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I manage my time just fine, Mrs. Dillon. Peter and I are happy with how things are, I said, trying to stay calm. She shook her head and walked into the kitchen, opening the fridge to inspect its contents. A woman's place is taking care of her home and her husband. These modern ideas about women needing careers are nonsense, she said. Every word stung, and I felt my frustration grow. That might have worked for you, but I'm not you. I'm not going to quit my job and become someone I'm not, I said firmly. When Peter came home that evening, I tried to tell him how suffocating his mother's visits were becoming. He listened, but his response left me cold. Mom's just trying to help, Marilyn. She has a lot of experience running a home, but it's our home, not hers. I need you to stand up for me. For us, I said, pleading. Peter looked torn but eventually said, She's my mom, Marilyn.
She means well.
We should at least consider her advice. That argument was long and painful, and we went to bed angry. It was the first of many nights filled with silence. As days turned into weeks, I started to feel like a stranger in my own home, constantly judged and always coming up short. The pressure to fit into an outdated idea of a wife was relentless, and my determination to stay true to myself was tested every single day. As months passed, Peter started nagging more and more about me not doing enough at home. He'd come back from work, glance around with a scowl, and make comments about dusty shelves or how dinner wasn't good enough. Too bland or overcooked because I'd rushed it after my long day at the publishing house. His favorite line became, if you can't manage both, maybe you shouldn't be working. One evening, after he criticized me for slightly undercooking some pasta, he dropped a bomb. Marilyn, I'm serious. If you can't meet me halfway and take care of the house properly, maybe we should rethink this whole arrangement, he said, hinting that divorce was on the table. I loved Peter, despite everything. I didn't want our marriage to fall apart over this. So, I made a decision that broke my heart. The next day, I told my boss, Madison, that I was quitting my job to become a full-time housewife. Madison was shocked and tried to change my mind. Marilyn, you're one of our best. Are you sure about this? She asked, looking concerned. I don't see another way, Madison. I have to try to make things work at home, I said, feeling defeated. Madison, always quick to find a solution, suggested a compromise. What if you worked from home? You could manage your projects remotely. Lots of people are doing that now. You wouldn't have to quit. It felt like a lifeline. I agreed to the arrangement, but didn't tell Peter. Instead, I told him I had resigned. He was thrilled, thinking I had chosen home life over my career. I began my new role as a housewife, seeing Peter off to work every morning and greeting him when he came home. But as soon as he left, I'd power up my laptop and dive into my editing work. It felt strange living a double life, but it worked. I secretly saved the money I earned in a separate bank account, just in case. However, living on Peter's salary alone turned out to be harder than we expected. Despite cutting back, for months later, we were running out of savings. I gently brought up the topic one evening. "Peter, I think I might need to go back to work. We're going through our savings too fast," I said carefully. Peter's reaction was immediate and angry. "That's because you're spending too much. You need to learn how to save properly," he snapped. I was stunned. I hadn't bought anything for myself in months and always shopped for the cheapest groceries. His words hurt deeply, leaving me feeling angry and humiliated. The next day, his mother showed up with a mission to teach me proper budgeting. She dragged me to the store, pointing out the cheapest and often lowest quality products. "Buy these, Marilyn. Stop wasting money on expensive stuff," she lectured as we walked through the aisles. Back at home, she showed me how to dilute dish soap to make it last longer. "You're using too much. You need to make do with less," she said, her tone patronizing. She even started checking my receipts, scolding me for anything she thought was unnecessary. "Why did you buy this? Just stick to the basics," she'd say, shaking her head in disapproval. Living like this was unbearable. Every day felt more suffocating than the last. I was losing my sense of self, trapped by their constant judgment and control. The situation was becoming impossible. I felt trapped in a life where I had to pretend to be someone I wasn't, and every part of me wanted to break free. But for now, I held on, waiting for the right moment and planning my next steps carefully. Everything came to a head one rainy Sunday evening. I was in the living room, on the phone with my mom, pouring my heart out. "I just don't know how much more I can take, Mom. His mother is always here, showing me how to save every penny until it hurts. I get it. We need to save, but this is too much." My mom's voice was full of both concern and anger. "Marilyn, that's not normal. You need to talk to Peter about setting boundaries. It's your home too, not just his or his mother's playground." I nodded, feeling a bit stronger with her support. But then Peter stormed in from the other room, his face red with anger. He must have overheard me. Without a word, he grabbed the phone out of my hand. A wife shouldn't be complaining about her husband and mother-in-law like some street gossip. He snapped into the phone before hanging up. I was stunned, my hands shaking. "Peter, you can't just grab my phone and talk to my mom like that." "Oh, I can't? Maybe if you had some respect for us, I wouldn't have to," he shot back, his voice rising, the veins in his neck bulging. "Peter, listen to yourself. Don't you see this isn't healthy?" I pleaded, hoping to reach the part of him that still cared. "Healthy? My mom was right. I should never have married you," he said, his words cutting deeper than I expected. "That's enough, Peter. I'm your wife, not a puppet for you and your mom to control," I fired back, anger now replacing my shock. "Then act like it, or leave," he shouted, his face just inches from mine. I stared at him, disbelief and sadness swirling inside me. "You want me to leave? At 3:45 a.m.? It's dark and raining outside. If you don't like how things are, then yes, get out," he said coldly, his eyes showing no emotion. In that moment, I realized nothing I said would change his mind or the situation. Shaking, I grabbed a few essentials, my laptop, some clothes, and my phone. It was clear I had to go. I reached for my purse next, but Peter was faster. He grabbed it before I could, holding it out of my reach. "You think you're leaving with this? I earned this money, not you," he said. "Fine, keep it," I replied, my voice empty. I couldn't believe this was happening. I called a taxi and stood by the door, my heart pounding. When the taxi arrived, I stepped out into the cold, rainy night. The rain soaked me instantly, but I didn't care. I climbed into the car, and as we drove away, a strange calm settled over me. I was really doing this. I was leaving. At the hotel, I lay in the unfamiliar bed, feeling a wave of relief even amidst the chaos. Despite everything, I hadn't quit my job, and my secret savings account, something Peter didn't know about, was now my safety net. When dawn began to break, I got up. I hadn't slept much, but I knew what I had to do. Today was the day I would take my life back. I had an appointment with a lawyer to discuss filing for divorce. It felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. The lawyer's office was a plain, quiet place tucked between old brick buildings. Inside, Mr. Richard, my lawyer, got straight to the point. "Let's get down to business," he said as soon as I sat down. "You're here to file for divorce, correct?" "Yes," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I can't go back to the way things were." He nodded, his expression serious. "All right. I'll need all the details, joint accounts, property, anything that needs sorting out." We spent the next hour going over everything. Mr. Richard explained the legal process, what to expect, and what my rights were. He was thorough, making sure I understood each step before preparing the necessary documents. Finally, he handed me a sealed envelope. "You'll need to serve these to your husband," he said. The envelope felt heavy, like it carried the weight of my old life. But with those divorce papers in hand, I was ready to move forward. I went back to the apartment I used to share with Peter. He was still asleep, probably tired from last night's argument. The place felt different as I packed my things. Every item I put into my bag felt like I was closing another chapter of our shared life. By the time I was done, Peter was awake and wandered into the kitchen. His hair was messy, and he looked confused when he saw my bags by the door. "What's going on?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. I didn't have much to say. There wasn't much left to say. Instead, I handed him the envelope. "These are for you," I said, my voice calm, even though I felt anything but. Peter opened the envelope and frowned as he read the papers. "Divorce?" he said, his tone full of disbelief. Then he laughed bitterly. "You think you can just walk out and everything will be fine?" He looked up at me, his eyes cold. "Come back when you're ready to apologize, and maybe I'll consider taking you back. But remember, you'll have to listen to my mother from now on." The absurdity of his words almost made me laugh, but I held it in. "I'm not coming back, Peter. I'm done. We're done." Walking out of that apartment felt different. The air was crisper, lighter, almost hopeful. I headed straight to the small apartment I had rented a few days earlier. It wasn't big, but it was mine. A space where I could start over. Every step felt heavy but right. A few weeks after moving in, I was back at work, throwing myself into the world of publishing. Deadlines, author meetings, and manuscript reviews filled my days. Being back in the office, surrounded by my colleagues, and the buzz of a fast-paced job, rekindled something in me I thought I'd lost. The routine of juggling work gave me a sense of purpose again. Over time, I reconnected with old friends, people who knew me before Peter. We went out for drinks after work, shared meals on weekends, and laughed together. In their company, I started to feel like myself again. Their jokes and lighthearted teasing reminded me of parts of me that had been buried for too long. Then, a few months later, I got an unexpected call. It was Peter. His voice was awkward, with a hint of desperation I wasn't ready for. "Hey, I got laid off. Things are pretty rough," he started, stumbling over his words. "I was thinking, maybe you could help me out financially," Peter said, his words hanging in the air. The request felt bold and insulting, considering everything we'd been through. Then he added, "And, maybe we could start over, rebuild. I mean, if you apologize to me and my mom, show some commitment." His voice trailed off, hopeful but unsure. I couldn't hold it in. I burst out laughing. The absurdity of his proposal after everything that happened was too much. "Peter, do you really think I'd come back? Support you, and your mom after you kick me out? Now that you're out of a job, all your so-called principles don't seem to matter anymore," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. There was a pause on the line. "So, that's a no?" he asked, sounding smaller and deflated. "Peter, I'm doing well. Really well. And honestly, I'm enjoying my freedom way too much to give it up again. I hope you figure things out, but it won't be with me," I said, my voice firm, making it clear that this was the end. After I hung up, I felt a rush of empowerment. Peter's call, ridiculous as it was, reminded me of something important. I was free now. Truly free. No plea or promise could ever change that. When my father suddenly passed away from an unexpected illness, it left our family in a difficult situation. Along with the grief of losing him, we discovered he had accumulated a $5 million debt. My mother and my brother, Jack, quickly decided how to deal with my father's inheritance, but they didn't bother to consult me about it. They made all the decisions on their own, leaving me with the heavy burden of the debt. This made me very frustrated and angry. However, part of me couldn't help but smirk inside, thinking about the struggles they might face in the future because of their selfish choices. I'm 25 years old, single, and work as a nursery teacher at a daycare. After graduating from a junior college, I've always lived at home with my family, my father, mother, and Jack, who is close to my age. Growing up, Jack and I never got along very well. He went to a prestigious university, and he always looked down on me for attending a junior college. His arrogance was clear, and he often made fun of me for being what he considered average. He would say hurtful things like, "With your plain looks and lack of impressive qualifications, who would want to date you?" The truth is, I do have a boyfriend, but I've kept it a secret to avoid Jack's constant sarcasm and judgment. There was a time when his insults would sting, but that time has passed. Now, I feel proud of my work as a nursery teacher. I love working with children, helping them learn and grow every day. I find great joy in my job, and Jack's words no longer bother me the way they used to. My mother, on the other hand, seems to adore Jack. She is always praising him to relatives and neighbors because of his prestigious education. I often felt like an afterthought in her eyes, while Jack received all her attention and care. This favoritism was hard to deal with, but my father was different. He was always on my side. Whenever my mother would give Jack special treatment, like snacks, my father would secretly give me the same treats to make sure I didn't feel left out. He supported my decision to become a nursery teacher and would tell me how proud he was of me. His support meant the world to me. My father was the CEO of a small company where Jack also worked. Unfortunately, the company had been facing financial trouble for some time. Despite my father working late into the night to try and fix things, Jack didn't seem to care about the company's struggles. He showed little interest in helping, which made the situation even more difficult. With my father gone, the burden of both the company and the debt is heavy on me. I don't know what the future holds, but I am determined to keep moving forward and stay strong. Though my relationship with my mother and Jack is strained, I know I have the strength to handle whatever comes next, just as my father always believed I could. Jack decided to quit the company, saying, "I can't work for a company run by someone who looks so poor." He found another job, leaving behind the family business. My mother, who had stopped working since she got married, fully dedicated herself to managing the household. However, she had no experience running a business or helping with my father's company. Despite seeing his struggles every day, she didn't seem to understand or appreciate the challenges he faced. Instead, she often criticized him for the company's poor performance. One day, she said, "The company is still struggling. If you don't fix the debt soon, I won't be able to buy that new bag I saw in the magazine. What are you doing all day? You're completely useless." Her attitude was frustrating, especially since she had a habit of spending a lot of money on luxury items without thinking about the impact. She never seemed to value my father's hard work, and this made me feel angry and upset. Even though I'm not an expert in business, I had watched my father work tirelessly from a young age, and I understood how difficult it was to run a company. I couldn't understand why my mother, who had been with him for so many years, couldn't see that. She acted as if my father was incompetent, blaming him for the company's problems when she didn't even try to understand the pressure he was under. One day, I couldn't hold back anymore. I confronted my mother, telling her she needed to stop treating my father with such disrespect. Instead of listening to me, she looked down on me and said, "Why should I be lectured by someone like you? People without an education shouldn't speak on things they don't understand. Keep your opinions to yourself." Her words were hurtful, and Jack, who had always sided with her, joined in and criticized me as well. It became clear to me that, despite being part of the same family, we were very different in our values and personalities. My mother and Jack were focused on appearances and material things, while I had a deeper respect for my father's hard work and dedication. During this tough time, my father's support was what kept me going. He saw my efforts and knew that I took pride in my job as a nursery teacher. Cheryl, don't let their words get to you. Education doesn't define your worth. What matters is the good work you're doing as a teacher, he told me. His words filled me with warmth and gave me the strength to keep going. Even though I often felt overshadowed by Jack, my father's encouragement made me feel brave. As long as he was by my side, I believed I could handle anything. However, life took a turn I wasn't prepared for. An unexpected event shattered my world. My father passed away. I was horrified when I got the call saying my father had collapsed at work. The company staff told me he was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Without thinking twice, I rushed to the hospital. When I got there, I was shocked to see that neither my mother nor my brother Jack had arrived. Worried and confused, I called my mother, only to hear her say, "I'm too busy to leave. You'll have to take care of your father." I was stunned. How could she say she was too busy when my father's life was in danger? I couldn't understand what could possibly be more important than being at the hospital for him. As a housewife, surely she had more flexibility in her schedule than I did. In disbelief, I took care of the paperwork and formalities at the hospital while waiting to hear from the doctors. The news from the doctor was heartbreaking. My father had suffered from acute heart failure, and they said he only had a few days left. I visited him as much as I could, hoping and praying to see him smile again. A few days after his collapse, he briefly regained consciousness while I was holding his hand. I was so relieved and asked, "Dad, do you recognize me? Can you hear my voice?" But he looked at me with a distant, empty gaze before closing his eyes once more, this time for good. My father passed away, and neither my mother nor Jack made any effort to visit him in the hospital. They didn't come until right before the funeral, showing no interest in making any of the arrangements. As we talked during the funeral planning, it became clear that my father's company had gone bankrupt, leaving behind a $5 million debt. My mother, with a tone full of disgust, said, "Well, inheritances come with debts." As the funeral went on, both my mother and Jack began blaming my father for everything. "He was unreliable in life, and now he's left us with this mess," they complained. "What are we supposed to do about all this debt?" my mother wondered out loud. Then, with a smirk, Jack looked at me and said, "I have an idea. Since Dad was always so fond of you, why don't you inherit everything, including the debt? It's only fair that you repay the love he gave you." My mother quickly added, "Yes, that makes sense. You should take on the debt, too." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even after my father's death, my mother and Jack were more focused on their own selfish interests than mourning his loss. They were trying to dump the entire inheritance and the massive debt onto me, showing no care or responsibility. All my life, they had looked down on both my father and me, treating us as if we were only useful when it came to their needs. Even in this moment, their greed overshadowed everything else, leaving me feeling completely betrayed. I had a plan in mind, something my father had asked me to use if anything ever happened to him. Now was the time to put it into action. I decided to keep my true intentions to myself and, on the surface, agreed to my mother and Jack's demands. I pretended to go along with their plan while quietly preparing to execute my own. I said to them, "I understand. I'll take on the entire estate, including the debt." My willingness to accept such a massive burden surprised both my mother and Jack. They expected me to resist more, considering I was agreeing to handle a $5 million debt. But they were so happy to pass the responsibility to me that they didn't question my decision much. They looked at me with a mix of triumph and pity, as if they thought they had outsmarted me. Jack smirked and said, "So, you're really going to pay off all the debt? That's lucky for us. I don't understand why you do it, but you're quite naive. I guess that's what happens when you have such little education." My mother and Jack were eager to walk away, feeling they had gotten the better deal. They gave up their claims to my father's estate, and since there were no other relatives to contest the inheritance, I became the sole beneficiary. After my father's death, I moved out of the family home. I didn't want to live there anymore, surrounded by memories and the tension with my mother and Jack. I began a new chapter in my life, and it was then that I quietly set my father's plan into motion. Several months later, I had an unexpected visitor, Jack. I hadn't seen him in a while, but there he was, his face red with anger, looking like he was about to explode. His rage was sparked by the sight of me coming out of a beautiful, extravagant mansion. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice trembling with fury. "How is Cheryl, who supposedly inherited $5 million in debt and has no social status, living in a place like this?" It was clear that both he and my mother had been wondering the same thing. They never expected to see me living in luxury after taking on such a huge debt. I smiled calmly and said, "Seeing your shocked faces is quite the reunion. I'm glad you're doing well." Jack wasn't amused. "Who do you think you are, making jokes? With no education. How did you end up living here?" "I want to know what's going on," he snapped. "This is where I live," I replied. "Is it really so surprising to see me at my own home?" Jack, growing more frustrated, moved toward me in anger. But he didn't realize that working as a nursery teacher had made me stronger than he thought. Lifting children every day had built up my strength, while Jack, who led a mostly lazy lifestyle, wasn't nearly as strong. I stood my ground, and for the first time, Jack realized that things were not as they seemed. Now it was my turn to surprise him. I quickly overpowered Jack and had him on the ground in no time. He looked completely confused as he lay there, and my mother rushed over to help him. I smiled and calmly began to explain everything. "The reason I'm living here is because of the choice both of you made to give up Dad's inheritance," I started. "Before he passed away, Dad had been quietly building wealth through real estate to secure our future. Even though his company had debt, the value of his properties went up a lot over time. After I inherited the estate, I sold the properties at the perfect time. Even after paying inheritance taxes, the profit from the sales was over $11 million. Jack and my mother were shocked, but I continued. Dad knew the value of the properties would rise, which is why I was willing to take on the inheritance, despite the $5 million debt. I paused for a moment to let that sink in before adding, instead of immediately using the money to pay off the debt, I made sure the employees of Dad's company were paid fairly. On top of that, I received a life insurance payout of $5 million. The shock on their faces deepened, and my mother interrupted, "Wait a minute, isn't life insurance usually paid out to the spouse?" "Normally, yes," I replied, but Dad changed the beneficiary to me. He told me about it while he was still alive. He was really hurt by your harsh words and your constant spending. He wanted to make sure the life insurance money was used wisely, so he trusted me to handle it. I looked at both of them and said, "I've had a dream for a long time, though I never told anyone. I want to support children who are struggling financially, and now, with the money from Dad's estate and the life insurance, I can make that dream come true." I then explained, "I used the funds to build this large house, which some might even call a mansion. I still work as a nursery teacher, but I'm also using the real estate skills I learned from Dad to grow my assets." As I finished explaining, my mother and Jack were furious. Their voices rose in anger. "This is ridiculous," Jack shouted. "Why didn't you tell us something this important? If we had known about the real estate, we never would have given it up." I simply smiled. "You were both so eager to get rid of the debt that you didn't take the time to see the full picture. You looked down on me and never expected I could handle something like this. But Dad believed in me, and now, thanks to him, I've made sure his legacy is used in a way that helps others." My mother and Jack stood there, speechless and angry, but there was nothing they could do. The choices they had made out of selfishness had led to this moment, and now they had to live with the consequences. I stood firm and replied, "Dad knew you would react this way, and that's why he kept everything a secret to stop you from trying to take it all. I didn't expect you to behave exactly as he predicted, but he was right." My mother was furious. "What are you talking about? We deserve our share of the inheritance. We have a right to it." Her demand shocked me. It was bold and selfish, but I wasn't surprised. Money has a way of revealing people's true character, and my mother and Jack were showing exactly who they were: arrogant and greedy, just as I had always known. "You both gave up that right when you renounced the inheritance," I calmly explained. "It's not possible to change your minds now. I can't give away what Dad worked so hard for to people who are only interested in themselves." Jack, frustrated and angry, shouted, "The uneducated one just keeps whining. Stop talking and hand it over now." Even though they continued to argue and demand the money, I knew I couldn't let them push me around. They were acting out of greed, and I had no choice but to ask security to remove them from my property. They left quietly after being escorted out, but their behavior didn't stop there. In the days that followed, security footage showed my mother and Jack hanging around my house, trying to figure out a way to get their hands on my father's inheritance. Their persistence was unsettling, and I knew I had to take action. Using the footage, I reported them to the police, labeling them as suspicious individuals. After that, I never saw them near my home again. A while later, I heard about my mother and Jack's situation through a family friend who had known us for years. Jack had found a new job, but his self-centered attitude quickly made him unpopular. Within a year, he had alienated his boss and coworkers, and he was reassigned to a desk job, a far cry from the special treatment he had once received as the son of the company president. Eventually, the stress of the work environment became too much for him, and he left the job. With his reputation tarnished, it became difficult for him to find a new job in the same industry. My mother, who had always praised and favored Jack, now turned on him. "Why aren't you working? Stop being lazy," she would constantly scold him. But it didn't change the fact that Jack was struggling to rebuild his career after ruining his chances. Meanwhile, I continued to live my life in peace, knowing that my father had trusted me with his legacy for a reason. While my mother and Jack had shown their true colors, I was able to honor my father's memory and his wishes by using his hard-earned wealth wisely. Their greed and selfishness only pushed them further away, while I moved forward, stronger and more determined than ever. Jack would often respond with excuses like, "I'm just sitting around doing nothing." Whenever my mother asked him why he wasn't working, she would lash out at him, saying, "What kind of effort are you putting in? You're useless and unemployed." After seeing Jack's failure to hold down a job, my mother's attitude toward him changed drastically. She once favored him, but now she blamed him for his lack of success and his joblessness. Her warmth turned cold, and she became distant, putting more and more pressure on him. The shift in my mother's behavior had a big impact on Jack. The constant criticism and coldness from her put a lot of mental strain on him, and he slowly became more withdrawn. Eventually, he stopped interacting with people and became a recluse, hiding from the world. Jack had always relied on our father's income and had never developed any real skills or the desire to work. Now, with my father gone, my mother and Jack both struggled financially. They were finding it hard to make ends meet without my father's support. As for me, my life took a much more positive turn. I am now happily married to the man I had been dating for a while, though I kept it a secret for so long. We live together in the large house that I own, which was part of the inheritance I received from my father. My husband shares my deep passion for helping children who are facing financial difficulties. Together, we are working toward making this dream a reality. We are setting up the necessary facilities and working to get all the required qualifications to support children in need. I feel incredibly grateful for the opportunities my father's hard work and planning have given me. His guidance and support were irreplaceable, and I carry his memory with me every day. With my husband by my side, I am living a life filled with purpose and fulfillment. We are not only building a strong and happy family, but we are also working to make a difference in the lives of others. While my mother and Jack continue to face their own struggles due to poor decisions and lack of responsibility, I am moving forward. I have turned the challenges life threw at me into motivation to build something meaningful. My father believed in me, and I am honoring his memory by using what he left behind in a way that brings good to others. Now, with a supportive partner and a clear sense of purpose, I am creating a future that not only benefits us, but also helps those who need it most. My father's legacy lives on through the work I do, and I feel fulfilled knowing that I am making a difference, one step at a time. During our honeymoon, my mother-in-law shocked me by stealing my $40,000 diamond necklace. When we got home, I asked her about it. She got furious, slapped me hard, and pushed me against the wall. To my disbelief, my husband took her side. Heartbroken, I left the house, determined to get revenge. They didn't know I had a big surprise plan that would change everything. My name is Camille. I'm 31 years old and work as a software developer in Indianapolis. When I think about my life, I still remember the joy of my wedding day. I was full of hope and love for Nick, my college sweetheart. We had met in university, bonding over late-night study sessions and dreams for the future. I thought I had found my perfect partner. But as they say, life isn't always a fairy tale. Soon after we got married, things started to fall apart. The first signs were small, like a tiny crack that slowly grows into a disaster. The main issue? Nick's mother, Sabrina. Sabrina, a woman in her mid-60s, raised Nick alone and was very protective of him. I saw their closeness when we were dating. She would call him several times a day, asking where he was and seeking his opinion on everything. I thought it was just a quirky part of their relationship, something I could handle. Love is about compromise, right? But after we got married, her behavior went from quirky to controlling. Sabrina began criticizing everything I did, how I decorated our home, the meals I cooked, even small choices I made. One day, she showed up unannounced while I was trying a new recipe. "What are you cooking, Camille?" "That looks awful," she said, giving me a disgusted look like I was ruining a science experiment. "Just trying a new pasta dish, Sabrina," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Isn't it a bit too rich?" "You should stick to the basics," she replied, shaking her head. It became clear that Sabrina didn't just want to visit. She wanted to control every part of our lives. And my husband, Nick? He didn't see a problem. That's when I knew my happily ever after wasn't going to be as simple as I thought. I felt my face heat up with embarrassment, but I tried to brush it off. I kept telling myself, she means well. Even when her comments felt more hurtful than helpful, I convinced myself she was trying to help. But as the weeks turned into months, her visits became more frequent and less welcome. She would show up unannounced, using a spare key I didn't even know she had. I'd walk into the living room to find her moving the furniture around like it was her own house. "This will make the room feel more open," she'd say, waving off my concerns when I hesitated to agree. The tension between Sabrina and me kept growing, but Nick seemed completely unaware. Whenever I brought it up, he'd just shrug and say, "You know how my mom is. Just try to be patient." It was so frustrating. How could he not see how much her behavior was upsetting me? I felt like I was all alone, stuck in a situation where my feelings didn't matter. The love I had for Nick started to fade under the weight of my frustration and hurt. Then one day, Nick suggested we take a honeymoon trip to Miami Beach. He said it would be a chance to reconnect and take a break from all the chaos. For the first time in a while, I felt hopeful. A break from Sabrina was exactly what we needed. But my relief didn't last long. Sabrina insisted on coming with us. "Nick, I don't think that's a good idea," I said, trying not to sound too panicked. For the first time, Nick stood up to her. "Mom, this isn't a family trip. It's our honeymoon. Just Camille and me." I was shocked but relieved. Maybe there was hope for us after all. The trip went well, and when we got back, I felt closer to Nick than I had in months. I was excited to be home, thinking things might finally get better. But when I opened the door to our bedroom, my heart sank. The room was a mess. Clothes were scattered everywhere, drawers were broken, and my diamond necklace, a $40,000 wedding gift from my mother, was gone. "Nick, come here," I screamed, my voice shaking. "What's wrong?" he said, running into the room. "My necklace is gone. Look at this mess. What happened here?" I said, pointing at the chaos. Nick's face turned pale as he looked around. "I don't know, this is so strange," he muttered, sounding confused and worried. Desperate, I turned to him. Do you think it could have been? No, Camille, he interrupted, his tone defensive. I can't believe my mom would do something like this. I swallowed hard, feeling a tight knot in my stomach. Deep down, a suspicion was growing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Sabrina had something to do with this. I needed answers. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, thinking about the mess in our bedroom and the missing necklace. How could Sabrina betray me like this? The woman I once thought was just overbearing now seemed like someone I should fear. The next day, I decided to do something about it. I went to several jewelry stores, hoping to find any sign of my necklace. After hours of searching and almost giving up, I stumbled upon a small shop tucked away in a corner of the city. As I looked through the displays, my heart stopped. There it was, my diamond necklace, sparkling under the glass. Excuse me, I called to the shopkeeper. Can I see that necklace, please? When I held it in my hands, it felt like the ground had shifted under me. I needed answers. Can you show me the CCTV footage of when this necklace came in? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm despite the storm of emotions inside me. The shopkeeper agreed, and we watched the footage together. My heart sank as I saw Sabrina, my mother-in-law, clearly handing over the necklace. I felt a rush of emotions, betrayal, anger, and disbelief. Furious, I rushed home, determined to confront her. When I reached the house, I found Sabrina already there, standing by the door with her arms crossed and a smug smile on her face. What are you doing here, Camille? You look like you've seen a ghost, she said mockingly. Don't play games with me, Sabrina. I know what you did, I snapped, my voice firm even as my heart pounded. Her smile faltered for just a moment, and in that instant, I felt a surge of confidence. I had proof. But as I prepared to confront her, I realized I had no idea just how deep her betrayal went. Standing at the doorstep, I took a deep breath to steady myself. Sabrina's presence felt suffocating, and my anger was bubbling up like a volcano about to erupt. I never imagined confronting her would feel like this, like stepping onto a battlefield with everything at stake. Camille, why are you staring at me like that? If you have something to say, just say it, Sabrina said, her voice dripping with mockery. Enough with the games, Sabrina. I know you sold my diamond necklace, I said, my anger finally spilling over. I blurted out, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. I saw you on the security footage at the jewelry store. Sabrina's expression changed instantly. The smug look disappeared, replaced by anger. How dare you accuse me of stealing, she snapped, her voice rising. You've always had a wild imagination, haven't you? I'm not imagining anything. I shot back, stepping closer. You took something that doesn't belong to you, and it's time you admit it. Sabrina's eyes narrowed, and she stepped forward, invading my space. You think you can come into my house and throw accusations at me? You're just jealous that I raised Nick alone, and that he still cares for me. You'll never be as important as his mother, she hissed, her words dripping with venom. Being his wife doesn't mean I'm less important, I said, my heart pounding. You need to understand that I'm part of this family too, but you act like I'm just an inconvenience. The need to defend myself overwhelmed me. I wasn't going to back down this time. Just then, Nick walked in, carrying a bag of groceries. He stopped in his tracks when he saw us, the tension thick in the air. He dropped the bag and rushed over. What's going on? Why does it look like you two are about to kill each other? Sabrina has been lying to me, Nick. I know she sold my necklace, and I'm done pretending everything is fine. I said, my voice rising. I turned to him, desperate for him to believe me. You need to trust me. I have proof. Nick looked back and forth between us, confusion all over his face. Mom, is this true? He asked, his voice shaking. I didn't do anything, Sabrina said quickly, throwing her hands up. Camille is just trying to stir up trouble because she can't handle that I'm still part of your life. Nick's gaze shifted between us. I could see the conflict in his eyes. I need to hear this from both of you. What exactly happened? He asked, trying to stay calm. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. Nick, I found the necklace at a pawn shop. I have the footage. Your mother sold it while we were on our honeymoon, I said, the words tumbling out. Nick turned to Sabrina, who was now visibly nervous. Her usual confident demeanor was slipping. "Is that true? Did you sell Camille's necklace?" he asked her directly.
I
borrowed it," Sabrina stammered, trying to twist the story. "I thought it was just lying around. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." "Borrowed?" I snapped. "It's not borrowing if you sell it," I shouted, my frustration spilling over. "You stole it. You knew how much it meant to me." "Stop yelling, both of you," Nick shouted, his voice echoing through the small space. "This isn't helping. Mom, why would you do something like this?" "It was a mistake," Sabrina snapped defensively. "I thought it was just an old piece of jewelry, something forgotten. I didn't know it was special to her." "Enough of your excuses," I exclaimed. "You've disrespected me since day one. I've tried to be patient, but this crosses the line." Nick stayed silent, and the silence felt like a heavy weight. I stood there, waiting for him to either defend me or let me fall. "I can't believe this," Nick finally said, looking defeated. "Mom, you have to understand. What you did is unacceptable. We need to figure out how to fix this." "Fix this?" I said, my voice trembling. "How can we fix this when she's made it clear she doesn't respect me? I'm done being the one who has to compromise." "You need to make a choice, Nick." Sabrina's eyes burned with anger as she stepped back, her face darkening. "You think you can come into my family and make demands? You're nothing without my son." Her words hit me like a slap. I felt tears prick my eyes but forced myself to stand tall. "I am not nothing. I'm his wife, and I deserve your respect." Nick looked between us, torn and overwhelmed. "I need time to think," he finally said, his voice low. "I can't deal with this right now." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me alone with Sabrina. The tension in the air was suffocating. I felt despair creep in, knowing we had hit a breaking point. "Your husband is weak, Camille," Sabrina sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. "You'll never win this fight. I will always be his mother." Her words were like poison, but in that moment, I knew I couldn't stay in this toxic environment. I felt like a puppet being controlled, and it was time to cut the strings. I had to take back my life, my dignity, and my identity. With that thought, I turned and walked out, determined to seek justice for the betrayal I had suffered. Leaving Nick and Sabrina in that heated moment was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. It felt like I was walking away from my marriage, but I knew staying would only lead to more pain. I drove to my mom's house, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. I couldn't let Sabrina's betrayal go unpunished. When I arrived, my mom was in the kitchen, humming as she made dinner. The comforting smell of her lasagna filled the air, and for a moment, I felt at ease. But the weight of everything that happened came crashing back when I told her about the day. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry you're dealing with this," she said, her face full of concern. "You deserve so much better." "I need to do something about it, Mom," I said firmly. "I can't just let her get away with this. I'm going to report her to the police." My mom nodded, her determination matching mine. "If that's what you need to do, I'm here to support you. We'll gather whatever evidence you need." That night, we went through the footage from the jewelry store and wrote down everything that had happened. I documented my conversations with Nick, pointing out how dismissive he had been about Sabrina's behavior. For the first time in a while, I felt like I was taking back control of my life. The next day, I called the local police department and scheduled an appointment to report the theft. As I got ready for the meeting, I felt a swirl of emotions, nervousness, anger, but also a sense of purpose. I wasn't going to be the quiet wife who let others push her around anymore. At the police station, an officer welcomed me and took me into a small room to discuss the case. I showed him the footage of Sabrina selling the necklace and explained the situation. The officer listened carefully, nodding as I spoke. "This is a serious matter, Miss Miller," he said, his tone calm and reassuring. "Theft is not something we take lightly. We'll need to investigate further, but I promise we'll do everything we can to help you." Relief washed over me as I left the station. I had taken the first step toward justice, and it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. No matter how hard it got, I was determined to see this through. Over the next few days, the police worked on my case. They gathered evidence and contacted pawn shops in the area. They confirmed the sale of my necklace and uncovered other details that suggested Sabrina had a history of questionable behavior. One afternoon, as I sat at my mom's kitchen table, my phone rang. It was the officer I had spoken to earlier. "Miss Miller," he said, "we've gathered enough evidence to move forward with an arrest. Would you like to be present when we take your mother-in-law into custody?" I hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation. But then I remembered everything Sabrina had done, how she had hurt me, invaded my life, and disrespected my marriage. "Yes, I want to be there," I said firmly. The next day, I drove to the spot where the police planned to arrest Sabrina. My heart was racing, and anxiety bubbled inside me. I couldn't believe it had come to this. The woman who was supposed to support me was about to face the consequences of her actions. When the police arrived, they approached Sabrina as she was leaving her house. Her usual arrogance was gone. I watched from a distance, my heart pounding in my chest. "Sabrina Ellen, you are under arrest for theft," the officer announced. A surge of triumph swept through me. This was justice. As they handcuffed her and led her away, I stood there, watching her world fall apart. In that moment, I realized I was free from her control and the weight she had placed on my life. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor, ready to take back my life. The day Sabrina was arrested changed everything for me. I had faced her and taken control of my own story. After the police took her away, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and empowerment. I knew I had done the right thing, but it still weighed heavily on me. In the days that followed, the legal process moved quickly. Sabrina faced serious theft charges, and I began to feel a sense of closure. But I also had to face the reality that my marriage to Nick was barely holding together. Nick reached out to me several times, asking to talk. I was hesitant, but knew we couldn't avoid the conversation forever. One evening, we agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. As I walked in, I felt both hope and dread. Could we save our relationship, or was it too late? "Camille, I'm so glad you agreed to meet," Nick said, his voice shaky as he sat down across from me. "I've been worried sick about you." "I've been worried about you too, Nick," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "But we need to talk about everything that's happened. You have to understand how much your mother's actions hurt me, and how your lack of support made it worse." Nick nodded, looking down at his coffee. "I know," he said quietly. "I can't believe she would do something like that. I should have stood up for you sooner." "I'm sorry," Nick said. "Sorry isn't enough, Nick," I replied, my voice rising slightly. "Your mother has caused so much damage, and I've lost trust in both of you. You need to decide whose side you're on." "I'm on your side, Camille." "I love you," he said, desperation clear in his voice. "Then you need to prove it," I said, struggling to keep my emotions steady. "I can't stay in a marriage where I feel like I'm less important. You need to choose me or her." We talked for hours, but it became clear the gap between us was too big. Even though Nick said he loved me, I couldn't shake the feeling that his loyalty to his mother would always come first. As we said goodbye that evening, I knew what I had to do. The following week, I filed for divorce. It was painful, but I felt lighter, like I had finally let go of a burden I had been carrying for too long. Sabrina's court date was set a few weeks later. When the day arrived, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. When she walked into the courtroom, she looked older and more worn down than I had ever seen her. It was a stark reminder of how much damage had been done. The proceedings were quick. The evidence was clear, and it didn't take long for the judge to give a verdict. Sabrina was sentenced to community service, ordered to pay restitution for the necklace, and fined $40,000. As the judge struck the gavel, I felt a wave of vindication. Justice had been served, and I had taken my life back. With the divorce finalized shortly after and Sabrina held accountable, I began to focus on my future. I threw myself into my career, taking on projects that inspired me. I picked up new hobbies, explored the city, and spent quality time with my mom, who had been my biggest support through it all. In the months that followed, I learned to love my independence. I found strength in standing on my own and started to rebuild my life on my terms. I reflected on the lessons I had learned about trust, self-respect, and the importance of standing up for myself. One evening, as I sat in my apartment sipping a glass of wine and watching the sunset over the city, I felt a deep sense of peace. I was no longer tied to the toxic relationships of my past. I had turned the page and was ready to start a bright new chapter, full of hope and possibilities. I had faced betrayal, fought for justice, and reclaimed my life. Now I was finally free,